fans beyond wrestling? This is Denver, Colorado, the man, not the place. Thanks for joining us. Another episode of Positive Contact. As always, being brought to you by Independent Wrestling TV. So head on over to iwtv.live, sign up using promo code Beyond, get a free trial, and if you want to support us, which you should, if you can afford to do so, stay on after that trial period's done. It's only $10 a month. You'll get to see the best matches in Beyond Wrestling history, going back to 2013, our entire catalog. And I got somebody with me today. His name is Wheeler YUTA. And YUTA, what's the best way that fans can support you if they want to, which they should?
Best way to support, probably follow me on social media at Wheeler YUTA on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to buy a t-shirt, right now I have teespring.com/YUTA cartoon. That's an online store that I have up for right now. Most of the time I sell merch at shows, but can't do that right now. So yeah, it's a good way to support.
All right, what do you want to talk about?
I don't know, man. We got so much to talk about, don't we? We have we can talk about some Uncharted Territory, some things we had coming up, maybe, if you want to get into that, or things we did in the past.
I had nothing booked going forward, so I have buildings booked. I don't have any ideas for anything, so.
Yeah. I don't know how much you've gotten into, like, the plans that we had going forward. If you want to talk about that, or if you want to talk about kind of what we had.
I'll follow your lead. What did we have planned?
Just what you're talking about with Uncharted Territory Season 3, man. Like, I was just really excited. I know you didn't book, like, any specific matches and stuff. You just had buildings booked. But I was super excited to be back in the White Eagle, man.
Oh, man, I thought we were going to talk about your training. But, okay, I guess we could talk about that instead.
You want to talk about the training stuff instead?
Let's give people a little introduction to Wheeler YUTA, how you got into wrestling, who you liked growing up, how you started your training.
Yeah, I don't think it's really known too much. Like, I actually, before I was ever like Wheeler YUTA, I'm in my parents' house in my dad's office in Myrtle Beach, and I actually wrestled for like 2 years before I moved up to Philadelphia to train with Drew Gulak. So I started in this place called the AIWF Academy that is no longer. Wrestled around here for a while, and then I really wanted to kind of reset everything. Like, I knew that the training I had was solid in the basics, but I really wanted to reset and train with Drew Gulak, one of the best in the world. So moved up to Philadelphia. I specifically picked, like, I went to Villanova. I picked Villanova because I wanted a college in the Northeast so I could get better indie bookings. So that's where all that came from. And then I started training with Drew Gulak and realized I knew nothing, and kind of built myself up from scratch there.
Was Gulak with Jakar or CZW at the time? Or, I mean, he's Teflon, so he can bounce between both. But which school did you officially sign up for?
I was officially at the CZW school. I actually had an in with a guy named Phil Stamper. He used to do Yeah, Phil used to do the social media for CZW. So I knew him from, like, independents around here. I did Dojo Wars. I wrestled the Amazing Gulaks on my first night there as business casual. Do you know about Biz Kaz?
Tell me all about it. That's what we're here for.
All right. So Dojo Wars, we used to have, like, it would just be whoever showed up would get on the show. So business casual was a gimmick that Drew came up with because he needed to plug people in, just like, all right, I need a tag team. They'll be business casual. It was Hoos Blazer because they were about to go out for whoever the first Biz Kaz was. And, like, a guy needed, like, one of them was wearing a blazer. And they're like, whose blazer is that? And they're like, oh, that's the name, Hoos Blazer. And then the other one was Pete Lightning. And it was just passed around with whoever it was. It was Pete Lightning and Hoos Blazer. The big rib would be, they'd go for their finish. They'd go Pete, Hoos, and they'd, like, lock hands and go collateral damage. And then they'd turn around and then they'd lose immediately, whoever it was. And that was, like, traded off with whoever it was at the time. The only people that took it and ran with it for a while, actually, were MJF and Bear Bronson because they did so well at it that they were business casual for, like, a year when they first started. But yeah, that was my introduction to CZW. And then I started training with Drew, and then Drew was also doing Chikara stuff. So I would go CZW on Monday, Chikara class on Tuesday, and then Dojo Wars on Wednesday. And then that was, like, my training.
Were you a lifelong wrestling fan? You always liked it growing up?
Yeah, I was always a wrestling fan. My introduction was like through a video game that my cousin showed me. And they're like, people do this for real? And I was like, really? And then I watched like Tribute to the Troops, 2004, I think, was the first show. And then I got into wrestling from there.
That's so funny because I liked wrestling growing up, but then I remember around the time, like even the precursor to the Attitude Era, obviously I'm dating myself, it was probably before your time, but they would start putting warnings. We're like, oh, maybe this has adult content. And I remember watching once with my mom, and Jim Cornette called Sonny a slut, and like she wasn't fazed by it, but I was like, oh man, like maybe I shouldn't be watching this. So like from 96 to 98, I didn't watch it. And the only reason I got back into it is because I got an N64 and I wasn't sure what games I wanted to buy, but they had just put out Warzone. And I remember I really liked Royal Rumble for Super Nintendo. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll like this wrestling game. And then I actually got back into following wrestling. And then it's also around that period of time that I made some like lifelong friends and they were really into it. And it was like a really cool thing to bond over, because even without participating in it, I always felt like it kind of fueled creativity. What's your take on it? What do you get out of wrestling?
Yeah, I always talk about, and also like funny, just to bring it back to like the Sunny story. It was really funny that my mom was watching Tribute to the Troops with us because we were watching it around. It was Christmas Eve when they used to do it then. And my mom complained that she saw Rikishi and Tori Wilson in thongs on the same night and wouldn't let me watch it for a couple years. So I would like watch it in secret. But yeah, like my take on wrestling is I think it's like the craziest performance art that exists in the world. Like, I was talking to a friend about this the other day because like she's like involved in theater and stuff. And I was like, if you told someone like an actor or an actress, like, all right, so you're going to do a play, but to do this play, you're going to drive however many hours, like you're going to drive or fly 8 hours. You're going to find this person, this other actor that you've never met before. You're going to talk to them about an hour before. You're going to put together a 15-minute play that you've never done. Half of it will be improvised. And then you're never going to do that again. You're never going to do that exact play again. And you're going to leave and drive and meet some other dude, some other girl, like whoever it is, like in another town, 15, like that's crazy. Like no one else does this. But to me, it creates some of the most like beautiful art that you can create because just that organic nature of it. And that's why I love it. Like to me, I never know what's going to happen until I get there. And I think that's awesome.
And it's not even just like a play. It's like an extended fight scene because you have to add in the physicality of it. And so it's like, Nick, you don't know what you're going to be doing in the play today, but you have to physically be prepared with not knowing what scenario you need to be prepared for.
Exactly. It's like improv, but also a sport. Like you have to be physically prepared. You have to be mentally prepared. You never know what's going to happen, but you have to be prepared on all these different levels. And I don't think anyone else has that, like any other form of entertainment or sport.
Now we can see the influence of Drew Gulak in your style. Is that an influence that you had when you broke into wrestling? Were there certain wrestlers growing up that you were kind of drawn to that also implemented that style?
Yeah, like the stuff that Drew does and like the stuff that Drew taught, like there's a lot of things like WrestleMania happened recently. If you watch his match with Cesaro, like they do this like crazy lucha arm drag off of the second. Like Drew could teach all that stuff without doing it. Like you would never expect that he knew how to do that. But like, yeah, the guys that I liked growing up were always either like technical wrestlers or like, so the first guy I was ever drawn to was Rey Mysterio, like a luchador, and being able to do all the stuff that he did just always blew my mind. But like the fact that like I would go from that, then drawn into more like technical wrestlers. Like I was fascinated with like Tiger Mask, fascinated with even like Daniel Bryan, Lance Storm were guys that I was fascinated with. Guys that were really good at like the craft in the ring, and guys that could kind of draw me into it being real were always the guys that I loved. So like those were just a few of them, but there's so many guys that really influenced my style. Even like Mike Quackenbush, like to be able to then eventually go to the Wrestle Factory and learn from him was like mind blowing to me. Like I had a picture of him. I had a poster because I was also a huge Colt Cabana fan. So like I bought a poster for, I want to say it was Chikarasaurus Rex, like their first big like pay-per-view. So I have like a poster of like Mike Quackenbush and Colt Cabana on my wall. Like it's in the other room in the closet because I'm in my childhood house. So that really those were the guys that kind of drew me in.
I'm going to hit you with a two-part question. Let's have one lead to the other. How did you find out about independent wrestling, and what specifically was it that made you decide you wanted to train with Drew Gulak?
So getting into independent wrestling, I didn't know it existed. Like, it existed in my hometown for years, and I had no idea. The first thing I found was Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. I don't think they were affiliated with the NWA at that time, but I remember the first independent wrestling match I watched was Joey Ryan versus Famous B on like one of those CWF Hollywood shows.
Not exactly Drew Gulak style.
No, not at all. But what that then drew me into was that was when Colt Cabana and Adam Pearce were having their feud. So I guess it was the NWA at that time, because they were having their feud for the NWA Heavyweight Championship. So then hearing Colt Cabana, I like searched him and then found his podcast. So then finding the art of wrestling is what drew me into all these people. So like every week I would just listen to the podcast, and it started where I would listen first to like WWE guys, but then I started listening to everyone's story. And then I went, wait, there's this whole other world that I had no idea about. And then I would just like, whoever the guest was, I would just search their name on YouTube and then watch their matches. And I'd be like, wow, this whole thing. And then I found like CCW, Chikara, like all the Beyond Wrestling, like everything, like all at once. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So that's what drew me in. And like right before I was like applying to colleges, Drew was one of the guests. So I searched Drew, found Drew. I remember watching his match at National Pro Wrestling Day. So that was promoted by Chikara with Colt Cabana. They had like an incredible match. And I was like, wow, this is one of the guys I want to train with. So then using that Dojo Wars connection, got in there. I remember Drew was like so much nicer to me than he needed to be. He told me, like, I remember he was like, here's my phone number, text me. I just texted him like a thank you for letting me do Dojo Wars. And he was like, hey, treat this school as this is your second home now. Like, this is where you should be. So that's really how that relationship happened. And he used to drive me to practice. Like he knew me from like one day. He met me at Dojo Wars. We wrestled. We didn't even really interact much in the match. And then he was like, yeah, so meet me at the train station. I'll pick you up, drive you across a state line to go to the CZW school. And we did that every week for a few years. So like, that was crazy.
I always find that Drew's somebody that has a particularly good judgment when it comes especially to who he associates himself with. And he kind of has a knack for just being able to identify like who's somebody that's one of the good eggs, who's one of the bad eggs, who can we work with to build up. And it's funny because Drew, to me, was one of the first wrestlers that was kind of at an established level and still saw something in Beyond Wrestling that he wanted to contribute and that he could get out of it. And obviously, to be under a mask at one place and to be kind of presented as almost a parody of a politician at another place, to then be able to come to Beyond Wrestling and create this persona of the University City Stretcher, which is obviously kind of taken him to where he's gone, as far as everything he achieved in the independent, and even to WWE, kind of a reprise of that character right now. He always saw the value of Beyond Wrestling. And I feel the exact same way that you did, where it's like, but why did he link up with me? Like, it kind of makes you feel special when you have such an admiration for somebody like that.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I remember he, like, so I'd been training with him at this point for like a few months. I just came back from my first like winter break. And he called me and he was like, yeah, man, like, I'm really excited. I got this big weekend coming up. We're going to Chicago. And like, we're going to go to Chicago, then we're going to go to Canada. So we did like AAW and then Smash Wrestling. I really want you to come. I really want you to come with me. And like, I didn't know this till later. Like, he asked Danny not to fly him and like book a rental car so that he could bring, it was me, I think Kimberly, I think she was already on the show. It was me, Kim, Brittany Blake, and then, do you remember Big Scare Dan O'Hare?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so it was Big Scare with us too. And like, he got us on the show, like we got to wrestle, and like, that's a 15-hour drive from Philly. Like, he asked to not fly so that he could get us booked. Like, that was crazy to me. Like, I didn't know that till later, and I was like, wow, that's like next level, really helping us out. But
The two people I really remember going to bat for you, obviously Drew Gulak, but also Hot Sauce Tracy Williams. What was your affiliation with Hot Sauce?
Yeah, so Hot Sauce at the time was living in Philly, so we would get to train a lot together. He would come to CZW practice every now and then. He never did. I think he did like one or two Dojo Wars, like teaming with Drew. But he would come to a lot of them. So he would like sit in the back, and he would just kind of watch. So that's how we kind of got linked up. And as much as like I was a huge fan of Drew, but I was also a huge fan of Tracy Williams. So it was like really great to be able to train with him and talk with him. So then eventually, especially once he moved back to New York, like he doesn't drive. So being able to drive him places was really beneficial for him. But also like in doing that, we really developed a bond and became friends. So I think he also saw something in me where he knew that one, I really wanted it. Like the fact that just getting in the cars was a big thing. But like he knew that I wanted it, but I think he also saw I had some sort of talent. I hope. So yeah, I remember the specific night you were talking about. It was like I'm always like a fan first, so it was crazy to me that I was picking up Tracy Williams and Zack Sabre Jr. and driving them to a show, and it was one of the last ones that we did in Providence, the last ones in Aurora, and yeah, so then we went to the show, and he really put in a good word for me, and that secret show was coming up, and just the timing worked out so well that I'm really fortunate, man. Like I owe so much to Beyond Wrestling, and if that hadn't worked out, like I don't know where I would have been right now. So.
How'd you find out about Beyond Wrestling?
Like I said, like when I was doing like my sort of research on the independents, Beyond Wrestling was still it was still mostly studio tapings at the time. Like most of the stuff I could find was that. But then once I linked up with Drew and Tracy, they were already mainstays at the time. So that was one of the places on, like, you know, you got like your checklist as an indie wrestler of the places you want to be. That was like one of the ones towards the top. And it was also one of the last ones to check off. Like it's doing CZW. I got to train at the Wrestle Factory. Got to do some like their student shows. So like I kind of had those checked off a little bit. But like Beyond was one of the ones that I really wanted. And then being able to get there was great.
I mean, just stroke my ego here for a sec. What about it? Why was it towards the top of the list?
Like, first of all, like, I mean, it's the track record. Like you look at the, like, you could tell that there was something special about the atmosphere. First off, like I'd never seen like fans. Like it felt like a punk rock show. Like there weren't chairs. There were fans that were just super excited to be there, standing right up against the ring. I don't know if you remember this. Like I was at the last American Rana in Fett. That was the first time we met. And like I remember being in the crowd and like sitting there and be like, wow, this is like super special. Like it was already at the checklist, but like that just made it like, man, I really want to be here. But like watching all the people that like were there and then just like skyrocketed into independent and WWE stardom was like, wow, this is a place to be. Like this is where the stardom made.
Do you have long-term goals to go to WWE?
Yeah, I think so. I think not necessarily WWE. Like I want to make a living in wrestling. And I think now, like the way that the landscape has changed, it's more feasible in the independents than it ever was when I was a kid. Like I never thought that I could make a living as an independent wrestler. Like going back to like the art of wrestling stuff, that was like the first time I was like, wow, this is possible, but there's so few people that do it. And then seeing all my friends being able to do it, it's like, wow, this is a thing. But you know, when you're a kid, you always dream of WrestleMania, holding up that WWE title, being that guy. So that's always what I like aspired to be. Like the way that wrestling is now, though, like AEW looks awesome. Like that could be another like place to be. Like everyone I ever talked to there is having the most fun. So I don't know if it's the be all end all, but it's certainly something I'd love to do.
Well, speaking of somebody that likes to have fun everywhere he goes, that's also in AEW, MJF was your first opponent in Beyond Wrestling. And chances are I'm probably not going to get a chance to do one of these with MJF. So just to give a little backstory is we did a studio taping at New England Pro Wrestling Academy in November of 2016. And I remember him being very vocal, very much wanting to get like FaceTime and like talk to me, which is cool. But like sometimes it's like, hey, you know, like there's other people here too. You know, and it almost at times can almost come off as being like a kiss ass, whether or not that's intended. Sometimes enthusiasm can be kind of you know, misinterpreted as that. But I'll never forget he said, you know, by virtue of who he was connected to with his trainer, and their connection with WWE, he had talked to William Regal, and Regal said, get to a place like PWG or Evolve or Beyond Wrestling. And to me, that was so cool, because that was the first time that anybody ever really acknowledged. I mean, come on, I know that they're watching, but it's just like knowing and then having evidence are two totally different things. And so that was just kind of like, with somebody that forward, I really want to do what I can to try and help MJF, because maybe these other places won't. PWG, obviously kind of exclusive, tough to get into. Evolve always has an agenda that seems to be a little bit inconsistent with maybe what's happening organically on the independent wrestling scene. So we had started MJF in December of 2016, and obviously Drew and Hot Sauce had put in a good word for you. So your first match that you had in Beyond Wrestling Ring was at Good Karma, which was kind of a tryout show that we did prior to 7 Years of Bad Luck, which features Matt Riddle versus Matt Tremont in a death match. If you want to go to iwtv.live, use that promo code Beyond to sign up and watch that, because those guys had a wild series of matches. But I remember feeling extremely disappointed about the entire tryout that day, with the sole exception of your match with MJF. I remember being extremely impressed by your presentation, because you had really professional looking gear. I remember being impressed by the work inside of the ring. And I thought that you guys had a really good dynamic too, where it's not just like, hey, I'm this new guy. You know, what am I all about? I don't know what I'm all about. So how can that translate in front of a crowd? What are your memories of that day and of that match?
Yeah, I remember, like, I was on my way there and I was like, wow, this is like, it was almost like I would already kind of accomplished, like, it's like, wow, like I'm getting to do what I wanted to do. But it was really nerve-wracking, because I was like, I want to make a good impression. I know that this is one of the places that can really help me take off and like accomplish that goal of making that living in wrestling. Like this is it. Like this is the place to do it. So I was really excited, and MJF and I had known each other from his days as Pete Lightning at Dojo Wars, but we never wrestled. But we always kind of, like, we were always friendly, and we always kind of talked, and we're like, yeah, I think this match would be good. Like, I think this would be really good. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, like, I think we had another opponent lined up for either me or MJF.
I think it was going to be different, because I want to say that maybe Kai Katana was supposed to wrestle MJF, and he might have suggested to switch it.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, because I remember there were talks like, I think you had said that I would probably have a different opponent, and then as it was getting closer, you're like, I think it'd be better for you to wrestle MJF. So that's what happened, and to be able to wrestle Max was really like that set it off. Like that was the first kind of point where I really had any press. Like Paul Crockett was writing at the time for PW Insider, and it was great for that to get out there and for people to hear like, oh, this Wheeler Yuta MJF match was really good. And like once we started wrestling, I remember being like, wow, this dynamic works perfect. Like this is like, I never felt like I could ever say like I'm Steamboat, he's Flair, but that's what people were saying to me, and I was like, wow, that I always felt like it was different. I felt like it was because those guys are gods to me, so I never could compare myself to them. But I remember hearing that and like, wow, like this could really be something. Like this could be that match that kind of gets me there. And like I just remember getting out of the ring and being like, wow, I think that was really special. Like I think that we really we got something here. And then obviously we were able to do the trilogy. We couldn't do American Rana that year because I was in Japan. But we did have the second match in Melrose, and then did the third one for Tournament for Tomorrow. So that I think that trilogy is like some of my fondest memories in wrestling.
We should put out a series with the greatest trilogies in Beyond Wrestling, because there's actually been a fair amount of them. Did you leave there that day feeling that you had accomplished what you set out to do? Like, did you leave there feeling like, yes, I made the impression that I wanted to make?
I did, but I also remember like it's tough because when you like you have that match and then you go and you watch the craziness of like the second show that day, and you're like, wow, these are best wrestlers in the world. Like this was insane. Like Matt Tremont and Matt Riddle just had a death match. That was wild. Like I remember just like my mind was blown. I was like, the whole experience was just surreal. And I remember like I don't think you got a chance to watch the match live. I think you saw it later because I remember like we had talked and you were like, yeah, man, it was cool. Thank you. And then like later, I remember you got a chance to watch it and you messaged me like, hey, that was like, I was really happy with it. And that was really good. So like, I knew later like that I had done my job. Like I felt good leaving there, but there, like, I wasn't sure. I was like, you're always kind of doubting, especially when you see the insanity that ensues in a Beyond Wrestling show. Like there was a full show after us that was just amazing. So it was tough to really feel like, oh man, I stole the show. Like I stole the afternoon maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of a hard person to deal with day of show anyway, because people that are trying to come to me for like positive affirmation are usually shut down because I will find something to be absolutely miserable about, because I am a perfectionist, and I think that even if it's impractical, even if it's impossible, it's something that's absolutely worth striving towards, just because the fans deserve the best possible effort for what they're paying for. That's always been my belief. Maybe I dwell on the negatives too much, but there's a lot of people that will ask me to watch their match, and they will not get that follow-up message. And just even looking at the 2017 into 2018 that you had, I mean, a series of matches against similar technical opponents, with victories over those opponents. And then I remember prominently around this period of time, we had an influx of wrestlers that were kind of new to Beyond Wrestling and wanting to kind of push this idea of it's a new crop of talent, because, you know, the most recent crop of talent that we presented has been harvested. Any thoughts about the new crop? Was it corny? Did you think it kind of worked? Did it feel like you were just getting lumped in with a bunch of other guys, or?
No, like before I touch on that, like just personally going back to where you're talking about like how you dwell on negatives, I think that that's part of why Beyond Wrestling is so successful, is because you're such a perfectionist. Like it might help you personally to feel like if you were to kind of let stuff go, but like I think that that's what makes Beyond so great, is because you are so focused on making it the best goddamn show it can be. But like, yeah, talking about the new crop, I really took a lot of pride in that, like being like, all right, so these guys are all going to, at the time NXT was the only ball game in town, so like these guys are going to NXT. Like Gargano and Ciampa were on the shows still, but also on NXT. Like, and then I think this was right when they had kind of gotten signed, so it's like seeing all these people go, I was like, all right, so this is really like the stamp of approval of like these are the next guys. I know that there's a lot of us, but then I took pride in just being part of that new crop. But then it also motivated me to be like, but I got to stand out, because all these guys are great. And like, but it's going to be sink or swim here. Like now you handed us the ball, someone's got to grab it and run with it. And I think, you know, looking back on it, the most obvious person who grabbed it and ran with it was MJF. But it really gave me a sense of like motivation. Like, all right, this is the shot. Like I really need to take advantage of it.
Looking to see, you were teaming with Tracy Williams for some matches, but then also the tournament for tomorrow 2017, which bled into 2018, came up. Do you have any preference as far as being a singles or a tag wrestler? Or are you just pumped to be able to team with Hot Sauce, or are you somebody that's more focused on just kind of doing your own thing?
It was super cool to team with Hot Sauce, just like for like my own kind of personal fulfillment. But I think that for my career, like I always knew I wanted to be a singles wrestler. Like teaming with Tracy was great because I got to learn from him. I got to be on the apron and watch him. I got to see how he put together his matches, because everyone kind of does it differently. So to be able to be really in on that ground floor with him was awesome, because like as much as you can train together, we'd only wrestled one time before we were a tag team. We've had 3 matches. We had one at Hybrid Wrestling. I can't remember where the second one was. And then the third one was at Beyond, was at American Rana for the IWTV title. So like to be able to do all that was great as a learning experience. But I always knew like I want to be a singles wrestler. Like that's where I wanted to be. So I was never like frustrated or anything, but I always knew that, all right, so once this kind of runs its course, I want to get back to the singles competition. And that happened with him signing with ROH.
Yeah.
And,
and boy did he ever sign with Ring of Honor.
yes,
And you can't fault somebody for making that decision because you have to have your real life taken care of before you can really reach your potential, I think, as a professional wrestler. And for somebody like Hot Sauce that was willing to kind of not go without the paydays, but maybe undervalue himself for such a long period of time, to be in a position where he's able to make a good living by being a professional wrestler, not have to beat up his body, and still be featured on such a big platform. There's no second guessing that. Me personally, I felt like at the time, Hot Sauce was almost like the heart of Beyond Wrestling. And it's just one of those things where it's like, it's bittersweet because I'm really, really happy that he's getting more, attention, being taken care of better than he ever would have been able to at Beyond Wrestling. But like, he's somebody that I absolutely loved working with. And maybe we'll get to it. Maybe we won't get to it. But like, I don't really book the IWTV belt. So when stuff was just kind of going haywire with Gresham, and I had kind of made a suggestion about maybe Hot Sauce, and others probably had too, but the fact that we were able to do that at Beyond Wrestling and the tying of everything is still one of those things that, looking back on it, stands out to me and is still extremely special. So, a number of different tag team matches that people can watch on independent wrestling TV. You teamed with Hot Sauce against Brandon Watson Zenchi, which is kind of a strange combination, but then the match with LAX, the match with Joey Janela and Orange Cassidy. I mean, there's some pretty good tag team matches. Brandon Watson, David Starr, man, you got married to Brandon Watts, and then obviously, all of the great run of the 2018 tag team tournament. But let's get back to 2017 tournament for tomorrow. That was just one of those things where it kept getting obstacle after obstacle after obstacle tossed at us and taking us into New Year's Eve. It was supposed to be you versus Ace Romero. Ace Romero, I don't even know if he was originally – it almost certainly wasn't supposed to be you versus Ace in the finals. I would imagine it probably would have been you versus MJF. But MJF had gotten hurt at CZW the day before our Cold Brew show, so we kind of had to patch the card together. And knowing that it wasn't originally supposed to be Ace, at the time there was another organization that was also running a show on New Year's Eve, talked to Ace and said, hey, man, like, let's do you and YUTA in the finals on New Year's Eve, but I don't know where you're going to be on the card. Like, you can't take that other booking. Have you already committed to it? No. Don't worry about it. Okay, because I don't want you to cancel on somebody if you already have. No, dude, this big opportunity. And then lo and behold, 3 days before the card comes out, Ace is like, hey, I can't, I thought we were going to be on first because we're the new guys. Like, I've got that other show. And it's like, yeah, man, I'm not changing around the whole show because you lied to me, flat out lied. So I wasn't too happy about that. It worked out to your benefit, though. And I do have a question kind of coming out of the story. You wrestled Flip Gordon on that show. Obviously, Flip Gordon, Ace Romero, two completely different ends of the spectrum. But what I want to ask you is that based on your style of wrestling, do you prefer to mix it up with people of a similar style to yours, or do you prefer to have that styles clash?
I think that like in certain situations, the styles clash can be great, but like you know what kind of like what Ace and I would do, like what me and a bigger guy would do, like you can kind of predict that. So like to be able to kind of have that creative freedom with a guy that's a more similar style, I think it's great because people, they do know what to expect, but you can throw more curveballs. You can like, I'm a lot less limited when I'm wrestling a guy that does something similar to what I do. We're a lot more familiar with each other and what we can do. So like I was really excited to wrestle Flip. I don't know if you remember, you asked me to like kind of name some opponents, and I had named the most random people that you could have not gotten on 3 days. Like I suggested X-Pac. Like that was like I remember I suggested so many just off the wall people because I was like, I don't know. But like to be able to wrestle Flip was like, like when you told me like, how about Flip Gordon? I was like, that's perfect. I was like, that's a great match, I think. And like we had so much fun. Like we had a really fun match, I think, and I think it was great.
I thought it was a great match too. I thought that it stole the show, and I was really kind of surprised at the chemistry that you guys had. That was obviously kind of Flip kind of ending his run on the Indies, so it was kind of a bummer that it wasn't something that was able to be revisited. But we did end up revisiting was you versus MJF in the finals of the 2017 tournament for tomorrow, which happened to take place on February 25th, 2018, as part of Beyond Wrestling Abadanza, which I also think may be the day that Tracy Williams won the Independent Wrestling Championship. So what a big day for two guys who kind of have an affiliation to win a tournament and win a title on the same day. What do you remember about the match with MJF as the tournament finals?
Yeah, I remember like we were both kind of talking like, hey, this is going to be like, we may not get to do this again for a long time. Like this is going to be really the end of our sort of rivalry, because even though we'd only had like 3 matches together, like total, like counting that tournament for tomorrow finals, people kind of married us together. People were like YUTA and MJF, YUTA and MJF. So to be able to, we were like, let's give them something to talk about. Like let's give them that payoff. So to be able to go out there, we really threw out all the stops. People don't know this, on like the opening sequence, I think I hit Max with a drop kick and I went to cover him and he sits up. He sat up, his temple hit my elbow, and he like knocked himself out in like the first 2 minutes. And he goes, like, I cover him and he's like, dude, I'm out. And I was like, what? Kick out. I grab him in a chin lock. I'm like, what? And he's like, I'm loopy. I don't know what happened. And I was like, okay. So then like right off the bat, we were like, oh man, we had this whole like epic planned. And like the fact that he was able to pull it together and he was fine and didn't complain about it. I don't think he ever told you that he was out right away. So that actually happened twice, because in the second match, I just kind of missed the apron. That's a pretty easy one to see. But this one, like no one knew. And I was like, oh, Max, are you okay? And he's like, I don't know. So like, I remember just like that adversity right away. We both kind of were like, all right, now we really need to grit our teeth and make sure that this comes out the way we want it to. And it really did. And I think almost that real adversity almost added to it, where we were really trying to make sure that this was the match that we wanted to deliver. And I think that's what happened.
It's funny because to me, I think booking titles and booking tournaments are almost a similar strategy, although titles obviously get defended more often than you have something like an annual tournament. But you always have to kind of decide, do you want maybe the surefire person to win because they're going to elevate the tournament or elevate the title, or do you want to use the title or the tournament to elevate somebody that may not be surefire in the eyes of the fans, but you as somebody backstage, you know that this guy's got it. So is this going to thing that's going to help him get to that next level? And just looking at some of the matches that you had scheduled following that, singles match with Jonathan Gresham, singles match with Matt Riddle, and then, like you said, wrestling Tracy Williams for the IWTV belt at American Rana 2018. Do you think that the tournament helped you not only elevate you in Beyond Wrestling, but also outside of Beyond Wrestling at the time?
I definitely do. Like that trilogy of matches with MJF, and specifically like Tournament for Tomorrow, being able to win that was like really my first kind of accolade in wrestling. Like that was the first time that I was able to kind of be like, this is something that's a big deal. Like you look at the track record of this thing, like this is important. And that's kind of what led to me getting signed by MLW. George Carroll saw this trilogy of matches and he was like, wow, these guys got it. So the only other time that MJF and I wrestled outside of Beyond Wrestling was the first MLW like reboot. We had a singles match there, and that was always kind of the plan for me there. And like things didn't work out the way that I think we wanted to with that. But like to be able to, that got me a contract. Like that was a big deal. That was really helpful for me. And I owe a lot to you, man. But
you're talking about oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you're talking about MLW. What was the dojo show called?
Oh, Dojo Pro.
And you were on that.
Yeah, that happened later. That was so that was done. That was like filmed over the course of 3 days. That was like its own independent project. There was Logan Sekulow and Dylan Spears were kind of collaborating on that. That was like two guys that had this vision for like a one-off like season of television. So it was filmed like it was like a gauntlet style. Like they ranked everyone. I think it was 16 of us, so it was like 1 through 16. And then like 1 and 2 wrestled. The winner moved on, and to be able to do that was really cool. But that all came after. That was, but yeah, MJF and I were both in that. But that did come after.
Did being involved in MLW, did you think that helped get you to Dojo Pro?
I think it did. I think it was kind of like the great thing about MLW for me was like it added legitimacy where you could be like, yeah, we had this television. Because even though like you and I know that like honestly I probably have reached way more people through Beyond Wrestling just based on the viewership. And that's nothing against MLW. It's just like TV versus streaming. That's just kind of how it is. But like it added that legitimacy, and it also gave me the chance to work with like all these great people. Like I did promos with Bruce Pritchard. Like that blew my mind. Like to be able to do that kind of stuff and like work with these really talented people was incredible. But I think that, yeah, MLW definitely helped with getting me to Dojo Pro as well.
Do you have a preference more so for independent style versus television non-WWE wrestling?
I love like the freedom that you get on the independents. Like obviously it's very important to like, you have your times, you got to stick to them because we're still doing something on like a live 2-hour stream, like Uncharted Territory specifically. But like to be able to kind of work with like within the confines of, all right, you have this crowd here and this is the primary people that you're pleasing. Like you can like react to them and change things more on the fly. And I really like that versus like playing to this audience that you don't know is necessarily there. Like, they're there, but you don't know, like, I don't know what the guy sitting on his couch is thinking about.
Right. You can't feel them in the moment the same way that you can at a live indie show.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you can't feel the hard cam. Like you can make your face to it, but it's different. So I do prefer kind of the independent style, but I also understand that reaching that larger audience, like you can watch it back and you can see like, oh wow, this did play very well to the camera, and that's why people around the world loved it. So it is a larger audience and you have to keep that in the back of your head, but in the moment it feels great to get that crowd reaction.
So I'm looking at the lineup for tournament for tomorrow, 2018 tag team tournament. Had a good set of opponents facing Dom Guarini, Kevin Koo. And then Travis Huckabee and Tony Depp in his fist. Also wrestling the Hooligans. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. Was that always the plan, or did that get changed day of? Because I know we had a couple lineup changes. And then the Beaver Boys in the finals. So I've got a 2-part question, even though I asked you another question about the Hooligans. I guess I have 3 questions. Were you always supposed to wrestle the Hooligans? What's it like having to put together 3 matches in the same day? And then I'll save my other question for when you go through those 2.
So I don't think we were originally supposed to wrestle the Hooligans because I remember – because, like, that was a 2-day weekend. So on Saturday, I remember we left. That was at the Wrestle Factory.
Wicked bad weather, wicked bad weather. And that caused complications for Sunday as well.
Right, because normally, like, when you have those shows, like, there's people coming from all over. But this was, like, everyone pretty much has to drive from Philadelphia that night. And it was all, like, terrible weather. We were like, do we drive it right now overnight and try to crash somewhere? Do we try to wait it out? Also that night, Jay Freddy got really drunk and puked on Orange Cassidy's floor. I have a video. I'll send you later. But yeah, that was like, I just remember that was a crazy, crazy night. And I remember we were wrestling someone else. I want to say Milk Chocolate. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm going to have those guys on later this week. I'll probably hit them with some hard questions like, why were you Brandon Watts, why were you married to Wheeler Yuta? You guys had so many matches together. But anyway.
Right. Yeah, I think we were supposed to wrestle Milk Chocolate and like something happened and they couldn't do it.
There's something injury related. But to the other part of the question, though, what's it like having to put together 3 matches, especially knowing that they have to deliver that level all in the same day?
Yeah, it was tough. I remember the almost the saving grace of it was that it was such a long day. Like it was still Powerbomb.tv. but we were doing the streaming, but there was also like when we were doing the YouTube kickoffs. So it was starting with the YouTube kickoff was the fist match. Then we had early on in the main show, the match against the Hooligans. And then later on we had the Beaver Boys final. So I remember that on the kickoff, like I had wrestled Travis a bunch just at training at Chikara. And like, obviously Hot Sauce is one of the trainers. So it was great to kind of like, we knew each other's style. So we knew what we were doing with that one. That was a pretty easy one to put together. And then Tony's obviously amazing and super easy to work with. I don't think I'd worked with him at that point yet, but like it was easy to put together. And then like the Hooligans is a entirely different ball game. It was a brawl.
You wrestled their match.
Yeah. Like, yeah. I remember the big thing that sticks out in my head was, and it's funny that you have no recollection of this because we had to ask you for permission. We fought onto the bar, and Hot Sauce and I did abdominal stretches together, like on the bar, on the Hooligans, like thumbs up to each other, and then fought off. And I got hip tossed off the bar onto everyone. Like we had that kind of crazy match. And then, but I remember the hardest one to put together was the last one because we were we were all tired. We had wrestled 3 matches in 2 days at that point already. Everyone was beat up. We'd all had different matches we had to have. We had to drive from different places. Also, we had to follow my favorite match in Beyond Wrestling, which was Orange Cassidy and David Starr, went on like right before us. So we were like, we know this is we know like magic is happening above us right now. Like we're in the basement putting it together. We're like, magic is happening up there. Orange Cassidy, instead of doing the slow motion Canadian Destroyer, did a regular Canadian Destroyer. And I've never heard a louder reaction from the locker room. I just remember being like, looking up and being like, guys, we're in trouble. And we're trying to put together like an epic match, like finals to this tournament that people believed in. So it was really hard to put together, but I think we pulled it off.
It's so funny because you say stuff like that, and it's like the match with, not to discount the match that you guys did for the tournament finals, but obviously the thing that has become almost legendary in Beyond Wrestling's lore and how many different things sprouted from it was the match with Orange Cassidy and David Starr. And those are the moments where it's like, you know what? Overall, maybe I'd give the show in terms of what I expected from it and how it delivered. And this is not placing blame on any of the wrestlers, but because of all the travel issues that were associated, maybe I would give the show a 5 out of 10, where on paper I was kind of expecting an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. But then you have something like that, and it's like, it's still absolutely worth it, because moments like that, people won't remember, oh, well, Jonathan Gresham was late, so instead of wrestling Colt Cabana, he had to wrestle Thomas Sharp. But I'll remember that. But the thing that you want everybody to remember is what they liked about it and what kind of a good feeling they had coming out of it. Obviously, you guys came up short in the finals.
Then EYFBO walked in, like, all over wrestling, and they did the main event.
And they did the match with Massage Envy, who kind of got the Raw deal and all that. And, I felt bad, and I was like, you know what, like, who do I placate? Do I do what's right for the show? Do I do what's right for the fans? Do I do what's right for the wrestlers? And that's one of those like very specific Beyond things where probably a lot of other places be like, hey, VSK, Dorian Graves, like, you guys got screwed, like, get you next time, kid. But it was like, no, you know what? Like, if there's a way to make it right today, we will. Let's still have EYFBO come. Let's give you guys the match, even though why would you just run this match after the tag team tournament? Like, it almost doesn't even make sense. But you do it because it's the right move to show your team that you appreciate them. Obviously coming out of the tag team tournament, losing to the Beaver Boys in the finals. Let me ask you this: as a wrestler, how do you, what happens? Because not everybody gets pushed all the time. But sometimes that means you get plugged into certain matches here and there, maybe until something clicks and it kind of spawns new ideas. How do you personally feel about that? What do you like? Do you have an understanding that this is just kind of the cycle of wrestling? Does that inspire you to want to try and expand your horizons out of that particular promotion to see if you can get a program set up at another place? Does it inspire you to want to try and pitch material? What is it that kind of keeps you pushing forward at that point?
Yeah, like that's really good to talk about, because it's kind of something I was hoping we could touch on. Like, I remember kind of after that, kind of feeling lost for a while. Like, and it wasn't. I remember like Beyond was the one place, at least, where I was like, all right, I'm still having consistent matches. I'm still booked. I'm still getting to wrestle great people. Like I got to do that treasure hunt tournament. I got to wrestle Jordan Grace. Like I was still getting good singles matches, having a good time. But I could see, like, we talk about that new crop, like MJF's like skyrocketing, and I felt like I was kind of down here. And I think for a while, like I kind of resented, not like promoters or anything, just like I felt like, why isn't this happening for me? And like I really took like a downturn. Like that's where I got really fat and pale, and like you could see, like, speaking of that like Jordan Grace match, do you remember the guy that commented on there like, you Yuta's so hot, if only he has abs, his belly I can't. I think I'm like combining a couple of tweets, but like I just remember being like I was kind of taking a downturn, and like I remember like I really let it get to me, and then I realized no, this isn't like, this is, one, it's the cycle of wrestling, but two, it's also like things that I'm not doing. Like I'm being lazy. I'm not working on like my promos. I'm not working on my own character development. Like that kind of period where like things are going up, 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 and then they didn't even go super down. They just kind of plateaued. I think that's a really valuable time in my life, because it kind of taught me lessons. Like, no, like this is something, like it's been going great for you so far, but you really need to work, because if you don't put that work in, you're not going to get to that next level. And that was kind of like the dip that kind of woke me up and made me go like, all right, I really need to start working hard again. And that's kind of what led into me getting like other opportunities, me reaching out to different promotions and stuff, like me reaching out to like AIW. That's when that kind of started. Me reaching out to like Black Label Pro. That's when that started, like being able to kind of reach out to more independents and realizing like, no, I need to put in the work myself. Like it was a time where I really needed to focus on me and work and get better. But
You know, you talk about Black Label and AIW. Do you see a value to the kind of partnership between the promotions that are all distributed by IWTV? Not getting a plug in right now. Genuine question.
no, I think it's great, because like I remember the first time I came to the, like AIW at the time wasn't super involved with IWTV. I think like they would put their shows up later at the time, but I remember like walking through the curtain, and I was an unannounced surprise and getting a reaction, and it surprised me. I was like, oh wow, people are excited, like great. So it's really cool to have that like that sort of reach further out, and like people know what to expect from you. People know who you are when you walk through the curtain. It's great, and people can actually follow your body of work. Like they don't just see like the stuff that you've done in one place. They can see like, oh, who is this guy? I like him. They can go back, look at the back catalog. Or if they're someone who's more up on the streaming, they can be like, oh, wow, I've seen this guy. I've seen him have good matches. I know who he is. I know what he's about. So it's a really great way for the fans to kind of stay connected. And that really helps the wrestlers too.
Uncharted Territory starts back up. You got a match with Chuck Taylor. I think we knew that Chucky Baby was not long for this world with AEW and kind of exclusive contracts looming. Talk about the match with Chuck Taylor.
Yeah, that was a really special thing for me. Chuck is a guy that I always kind of looked up to. I wrote like a pretty long thing for social media. I'm sure you can still find it on my Twitter somewhere. But like Chuck was a guy that I used to like get in trouble for watching his matches during class. Like I would be in the computer lab, and we're all supposed to be like practicing typing or something, and I'm just watching like Chuck Taylor set off a grenade in Chikara, and everyone's like, everyone around me is like looking over at my computer and stuff. So that was like a really special moment for me to kind of do that. And I'd gone to his training classes at Chikara, and kind of like we developed a friendship. And then it got to the point where like when I was between places for a month, and I could have moved back in with my parents for that month, but it wasn't feasible for my wrestling bookings. And I kind of like told him that offhanded, and him and Orange Cassidy were roommates at the time, and they were like, hey, do you want to just hang out here for a while? And I was like, sure. And it was like a couple days that turned into a week, that turned into a month of living on their couch rent free. And like, that was always super special to me. So then to finally get that singles match, to be able to sort of earn that stamp of approval was really special for me.
That's cool. I mean, those are a lot of guys that are all affiliated too, between Hot Sauce, Gulak, Orange Cassidy, and Chuck Taylor. So not a bad group of guys to have looking out for you. But then you went to the other side of the world. You went to Germany for WXW. How'd you get hooked up with that? What was that experience like?
That was great, and that's like, I don't know, everything kind of comes back to Beyond. I was so at like the time I was driving like Zack Sabre to a lot of his stuff because he was living near Hot Sauce. So when he needed a ride to Beyond, I would kind of take him. So doing that, I kind of became friends with him. He was super happy when I went to Michinoku Pro because he obviously has great ties with Japan, lives there now. He actually pitched me to some other places before Michinoku Pro finally took me on. But yeah, so he was getting ready at the WrestleMania weekend in New Orleans to wrestle Walter. Walter comes up to him, and they're great friends, and he's like, all right, hey, Zach, what do you want to do tonight? And he's like, oh, I want you to book him in Germany. It was the first thing he said to him. And Walter goes, all right, email me. And then they called their match, and I was just sitting there like, wait, what? And then I emailed Walter like 2 days ago. I was like, or 2 days later, I was like, hey, man, I know kind of offhandedly Zach said this. I'm not sure if you remember me. And he's like, no, I remember you. You want to come for 3 months? And I was like, great. And then that wound up turning to 2 because they take a break in the summer. So there was no shows. But yeah, that's how that got hooked up. And then I was able to work with all these incredible people. I had that singles match with Walter. He's the WWE UK champion at the time. I remember sitting in the ring. It's like 1,000 people there. It was their big show. It was the biggest show of the tour too. Like they could have done this on like a small town show somewhere, but instead they were like, how about Walter and Wheeler at the biggest show that we have while he's here? And I'm like squatting in the corner like I normally do, and I'm looking at him, and he like kind of like shows the belt to me, like, and I'm like, whoa, this is really cool. So yeah, that was such a wonderful experience to be able to live there, train there, and do all that. That was awesome.
I like Walter. I've alluded to it before, but I feel like I should tell the story that after an Evolve show in New York one night, he was drinking like a Bud Lime-A-Rita that was like purple, which is just like, I don't know, like you don't picture Walter drinking that. And I think that was when I asked him to do Lit Up, which was our all intergender show WrestleMania weekend in New Orleans, and he was just like, I won't, but Tim Thatcher should wrestle Tony Storm. And that's how that match got set up. It's like one of like the top 5 most watched matches on the Beyond Wrestling YouTube channel. And I think that maybe he did it as a rib on Thatcher. I don't even know. Like, and I remember Thatcher showing up that night, and I'd be like, "Hey, man, like you have the most anticipated match. Like, it's the main event." And he's like, "Oh hell, you know how Thatcher is." Like, but yeah, that's funny. You know, those Europe guys that are able to travel to the United States and obviously around the world, but all be able to travel together, all kind of have a special bond too. So to have somebody like that going to bat for you in an international capacity, that holds a lot of water too. Come back from Germany, get thrown into a little program ski called Uncharted Territory, and a series of matches with Cold Steel Chuck O'Neil. How'd that go for you?
Yeah, that was great. You know, like kind of talking about that funk that I was in before everything. I think the big turning points were the Chuck Taylor match. Like I'd already started to come out of it, but like the Chuck Taylor match, going to Germany, and then Uncharted Territory. Because Uncharted Territory, I was really able to take all the stuff that I'd learned in Germany. Like I was learning it there, but then you apply it in still an unfamiliar environment. Like it's wrestling, but it's also in a different place, different situations. So it's still a little bit strange to you. But then coming back home, being able to like be back in my element, I was like, all right, now I can use all this stuff that I learned. And being able to have like, I had all these sweet singles matches in a row where that would end in Chuck O'Neil beating me up. But it was great to like, I got to wrestle like Alex Reynolds, Brandon Thurston, David Starr. And then moving into that, like that program was ongoing the whole time with Chuck O'Neil. I had a lot of fun because even though Chuck and I, in a way, we do have kind of similar styles, it's also very different. Like we're technical in very different ways. So to be able to wrestle him was a super fun test. And one of my favorite matches that I've ever had is the one that was on the finale of season 1 of Uncharted Territory, that knockout or submission only. And I loved the way that came together. I know that you alluded to it when we streamed American Rana recently. Like, we had a very short match in American Rana. But I almost like that, because I think people were expecting, all right, here's the payoff, and then we didn't give it to them. And then on Uncharted Territory, we were really able to take that platform, go wild, and have the match that we knew that we could have. And that's one of my favorite matches that I've ever had.
I mean, I was pumped because when you came back from Germany, maybe people knew that you were back, but I think that your first appearance on Uncharted Territory, coming to make the save for Chuck Taylor, who had just wrestled last, you get a big pop for that. People were really excited to see you back. And then, going back to American Rana 19, I mean, there were points where it didn't seem like even the shorter match was going to be on the card in any incarnation, obviously being booked through a third party, having a little bit of a back and forth process. But no, I think that it was really a situation where we ended in the right spot and being able to do a match that stood out more so. Because let's face it, if you're gonna do a knockout or submission match and have elements of hardcore wrestling in it, if 3 hours later is an Iron Man match with Joey Janela and David Starr, it might not be, your match might not get remembered the way that it deserves to be. And then, looking at Uncharted Territory season 2, kind of ended up where you were teaming with Layla Hirsch a little bit. Obviously, the idea being that she also went to Germany. What was it like working with Layla?
Working with Layla was great. She kind of came around the CZW school like right towards the end of when I was still there. So like I had always known of Layla, and I knew that she had kind of this great raw skill set at the time, like when I first met her. But then like once she started wrestling for Beyond and seeing her on Uncharted Territory, I was like, oh wow, like she really put it all together. Like she's amazing. I was like, wow, this would be great to work together. And I never thought that it would be in a tag team capacity. I always thought like, yeah, once we get to wrestle, it's going to be great. And then when it sort of came up, like, wait, maybe this could be a tag team. That was like a really cool opportunity. And also she hadn't really wrestled in tag team matches before. So it was a little strange. Like I still consider myself fairly unexperienced, like compared to different guys who've been around a lot longer than me. Like I've been doing it 6 years. So like relatively speaking, not super seasoned or anything, but to be able to kind of teach her some tag stuff, because I'd been in a few tag teams up to this point. It was really cool to kind of take that role. And then obviously she's incredible. Like our tag stuff aside, just watch a match with David Starr, it's phenomenal. Like, so to be able to have that kind of partner was really great. And I think that we blended pretty well. We got to do some fun promos for IWTV. So I really looked at that fondly.
It's cool too, because sometimes it's like, hey, let's try and do this. Do we have kind of a point that we want to end on in terms of what we want the match to be? Do we have a point that we want to end on in terms of the time frame that we want to execute it? And obviously heading into Heavy Lights in the Crown, she was leaving that day to go to Japan.
Yeah.
So the way that it came together is you got to do a singles match with Fred Yehai, which is the first time you had a singles match with him. When we go back to talking about similar styles, and one of the things to me at the end of the day is that if you can wrestle, there's always going to be a spot for you. And to have somebody that's now kind of been born out of the style that was popularized when like Biff and Gulak and Thatcher were all rivals in different promotions, but probably most pronounced in Evolve, those are, to me, that is always what the meat and potatoes of independent wrestling is going to be. Those are always going to produce the most spectacular matches. And there's not a lot of guys cut from the same cloth anymore, like you and Freddie Yehai. So to be able to present a match like that for the first time ever, who are other people that are active right now that you would also include in that category, whether or not you've wrestled them, in terms of having that knack for that technical wrestling that you can apply on an independent level?
So I guess the first one that kind of sticks out to me is Daniel Makabe. Like he's incredible right now, and he's one of those guys that has all that technical stuff. Like he's absolutely phenomenal at that. So he's one that sticks out. One that a match that I would love to have is with Alex Shelley. Seeing him, because he was almost the precursor to those guys. Went away, came back, and is now having like these phenomenal matches. One of the guys he's been wrestling is Lee Moriarty. He's another guy kind of cut from that cloth. Sort of the new age guys that are trying to bring that style back. And then I don't know if he he's always been like the heart and soul of the independents to me. Colt Cabana. Obviously now he's transitioning into AEW. I don't know if his contract's exclusive or if he can still do it on the independent level. But like thinking about those guys, like you said, like that technical style is always going to be there. It's always the meat and potatoes because we may never have the money to produce a Boneyard match or a Firefly Funhouse, you know, and as cool as some of the other styles are in wrestling, like things kind of come in and out of fashion. But when you go back to what that base, that core of what we're doing is, it always seems to come back to that technical wrestling, and there's always those guys there. So yeah, Makabe, Shelley, Moriarty are guys that really stick out in my mind.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Hackman, obviously. I'm not going to ask you to do the laugh right now because I don't want you to wake up your folks. And I also don't want to react in a way that I'm going to laugh and then wake up my folks because quarantining is so fun.
Yeah,
but what
he's here, so he will definitely wake up.
We don't want to wake up any family members. What did you think of Beyond Championship Wrestling and specifically being asked to take such a stark departure from Wheeler Yuta to take on the persona of Hackman?
Yeah, so like as much as I just talked about all the technical wrestling being like my passion and all the stuff that I love, it's also super fun to just do something completely different. So like when you're like, I want this hacker, I want it to be really corny. I want you guys to wrestle for a USB drive, but I don't really know what else. I was like, all right, so let me think of what's the corniest thing I could do. And like the first thing that came to mind was Repo Man. So I was like, yeah, let me just film these vignettes that I don't know if they came out like corny 90s vignettes. That's kind of what the original vision was. And then it kind of took a life of its own. But it was so much fun to be able to do something just completely different. Yeah, like Beyond has never done anything like that. So to be able to be a part of this crazy parody show that we did where there were literally people from WWE watching us like from the crowd, like, and we're doing this crazy show where I'm making fun of Repo Man and like getting to do this crazy laugh. I also never get to be a villain really anywhere. So being able to do that was fun. But yeah, it was so much fun to like shoot and produce those things, mostly filmed by my girlfriend in an empty computer lab at her college. Like it was just the most fun because as much like in the ring, I think like technical wrestling, of course, is like for me the foundation of like what we do, and that's what it all comes back to. But out of the ring, just to have any kind of creativity is awesome. Like that's why people love Effie, people love Danhausen, people love Warhorse, is because they're so creative and they can find these outlets. So even if I kind of struggle sometimes as Wheeler Yuta to kind of find what that is for me out of the ring, Hackman was so easy because I was like, what's the craziest thing I could do? All right, hack into Christian Casanova's browsing history and download it to my flash drive. That's the craziest thing I could do. So I don't know if anyone noticed, like I just went to hackertyper.net. So whenever I typed, it would just put random text in green that meant nothing. Like it never meant anything. And then I just edited away, Googled Christian Casanova on image search, cut back to that, and was like, this needs something. How about a weird laugh? And then so that's how it all came about. But it was the most fun. The most fun.
It's funny because it's still something that people bring up, and I don't know if you see the feedback on it, is it something that you would ever consider doing again?
I think I would in the right circumstances. It's definitely not like I don't want to make it my bread and butter, obviously. Like I still want to go back to being able to have like kind of more serious stuff, but it's super fun. Like I'd love to do it kind of in and out. I don't know, maybe every once in a while, maybe a Halloween this year, I'll just come out as Hackman and do it, but it's fun.
Now, obviously, at the start of the chat, we were talking, and at the conclusion of the Beyond Championship Wrestling show, we announced Uncharted Territory Season 3, that we were going to have a school starting up in Worcester, that we were going to be going down to Tampa for big balls, and then even plans that I don't even know that I revealed to the roster as far as what we had planned for American Rana and beyond that. Part of what I thought was cool to me is, you had never wrestled Christian Casanova. Let's give him this wacky version of the match. Let's come back with Uncharted Territory. And one of the ideas that I did have was, playing off the relationship with maybe Chuck O'Neil and then some of his adversaries. But at some point, I wanted to see the match with you and Christian Casanova as if it was wrestled in a more traditional Beyond Wrestling environment. Who are some other people on the Beyond Wrestling roster that you haven't had a chance to work with that you're looking forward to?
Oh man, there's so many of them. So many great competitors there. One that like kind of sticks out in my mind is I did get to wrestle the Beaver Boys, but I'd love to wrestle John Silver. Like that's a match that I'd love to have. I don't know if you would consider him like a main roster member, but like he was around obviously a lot towards the end of Uncharted Territory Season 2. Eddie Kingston would be a match that I would love to have, just because my love for that era of independent wrestling that he originally came from, and just being able to have sort of different matches. I've already wrestled him, but I'd love to wrestle Dickinson again. I think that we had a great match, but we were at the same time we were kind of on different pages at the beginning. So I'd love to be able to kind of iron that out. But yeah, there's so many guys beyond wrestling.
Yeah, I mean the match with Chris. My take on it is I felt like it was more like Chris trying to wrestle your match as opposed to you trying to wrestle Chris's match. And if you guys had another shot at it, I know that you could really nail it. Not to say that it was a bad match by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely a little bit different expectation-wise. One of the things that you kind of touched on a little bit throughout the interview is helping different people with rides and stuff like that. First of all, let me just say that some people, especially if they're clustered in the New York area, just don't have any way to get to shows, but they're still professional wrestlers and they don't do anything to solve that problem. So there are unsung heroes behind the scenes that are able to assist with rides. And the show can't go on in some instances without kind of those selfless contributions. But that also leads to opportunities where you can probably pick the brain of people or even have unusual experience. I know one of the people that you ride with all the time, not to kill the mystique or anything like that, is Nick Gage.
Yeah, riding with Nick Gage is, I said it in one of the chats, it's one of the great joys you've brought to my life is to be able to know Nick Gage and to ride with him. Like I'm a kid that was pretty lucky. Like I grew up in the suburbs and had a pretty good life. And I never really kind of experienced the life that Nick had. And so to be able to ride with him just the life experience, listen to him talk about stories of him in prison and how they would sneak meat off of a truck and a guard would be I don't know if I should say this, but a guard would be searching one guy and the one guy would throw it over his shoulder to the other guy that had already been I would have never, who has a friend that robbed a bank?
Right.
It's crazy to think, but that kind of stuff. But then even just in wrestling, his take on wrestling it's so different because we wrestle such different styles, but it all comes back to that crowd interaction and the way that he appreciates that crowd. I think we're all kind of experiencing it now with these unfortunate circumstances where it's all kind of taken away from us. He had that for 5 years. And the only people that really kind of looked out for him when he was there were wrestling fans. He had a few close friends that would continue to write to him. But other than that, it was wrestling fans were writing to him in prison saying hey man, you'll get through this. We know you're a good guy at heart. We know that it was whatever happened, but we love you. We're excited for you to get out. When he first got out, he was able to go back right into wrestling. People welcomed him with open arms. So he really taught me a lot of how important that crowd connection is, but also just to be grateful for all the stuff that you have in wrestling. I remember one night, we get in the car and he just goes, "Hey man, I just paid my rent. How fucking awesome is that?" And to see that just gratitude that he has for the opportunities you get, it really makes you go man, this dude who's faced all this adversity, had all these struggles, is this grateful for every fan there. When he tells you, when he ends his promos with "I love you," it's true. He does. He really appreciates everything that every fan's ever given to him. So to be able to hear that is incredible. But also, his other stories are fun too.
And people probably don't even realize what a positive force he is behind the scenes in terms of locker room morale. Like, he really, really loves wrestling and is like extremely enthusiastic. And that enthusiasm is infectious, and it can really help, elevate the morale in the locker room to give everybody a boost to work extra hard and really appreciate what they have. What else you got? Anything you want to get in here before we wrap this up?
Oh man, I don't know. Just thinking, like, talking about that kind of like gratitude. Like, I don't know, wrestling fans. Like, I know that this is a tough time where we don't get to see each other. We don't get to go out and perform in front of the crowd. And maybe it's just a like on Twitter. Or it's like buying a T-shirt. But like, we really, me personally, and I know that a lot of us feel this way, like, we really are grateful for all the stuff you do for us. Like, you allow us, even in this time where we can't really provide for you, unfortunately. Like, it's just kind of how it is. Like, we have the back catalog of stuff that we can show you, but like, we can't get in the ring and wrestle for you anymore. But like, we still have that support from you guys, and it really keeps a lot of us going. And just kind of thank you to everyone, but that's really all I got.
That's how the independent wrestling community really is, especially in 2020. It's whether you're a wrestler or whether you're a fan, it is still all one big community. And I always say it, symbolically doing away with the guardrails and Beyond Wrestling, we're breaking down those barriers because, some people pay tickets to be on the show, but even if you're a wrestler, like, you pay dues, you have to pay to be part of seminars. Sometimes you're taking the opportunity to be on a show and, you have to pay your own way out there. You might not be getting compensated for your match. So in a lot of ways, it's not just, hey, somebody buys tickets and somebody performs. There's investment in the community at many different levels between fans and wrestler. And obviously the wrestlers themselves are fans, or else, it becomes so much of a labor of love. And it's great to have the aspirations like you do to someday make a full-time living as a professional wrestler, whether that's in an independent capacity or whether that's with an exclusive contract. But really on an independent level, like, you cannot undervalue the community. And all I can say is, like, man, I feel like I'm living through a disaster movie. Never in my lifetime did I think that, like, we would actually have to, like, live through a pandemic. And it's like maybe wishful thinking that, things will go back to normal even months from now, because I'm trying to condition myself, like, man, maybe it's going to be years. And then if it ends up being months, like, I'll be happier. But the silver lining on all of it is it's happening at a time where we all have electricity, we have internet, and we can still stay connected as a community. And we can't let this community die during this period of time. Like, we have to really do everything in our power to be creative, to be smart, but also to be compassionate, and really just do everything in our power to try and keep this thing going as best as we can. I have had I talk to Dickinson every day, and multiple times a week on the phone. Obviously, he was the first guest on Positive Contact, but there's no question in my mind that one of the first things that's going to bounce back once we go back to a normal is going to be independent wrestling, because there's so many people that want to support it, and there's people that will put up money for shows that may not even make money. They may lose money just because they want to do it. There's wrestlers that may wrestle for free just because they want the opportunity. I really strongly believe that the independent wrestling scene is going to be one of the first things that bounces back in a normal capacity, even if the money's not there, because the passion's there. And it's cool to be able to get you on today, to be able to tell your story. I love doing this, to be able to, it's cool talking about the backyard wrestling people, because I have that connection that goes years back. But, my connection with you, like you said, only goes back to American Rana at Fat Music in 2016. So not even 4 full years. So to be able to learn so much about you and, hear about all of your great experiences in Beyond Wrestling and otherwise, like, I feel like that's one of the things that can bring us together closer, which is great, because, like, specifically the Positive Contact that I did with Christian Casanova, like, I don't think I've ever even talked to Christian. You know what I mean? It's like, here's a guy that we pushed. He won the tournament, and it's like, I don't know this guy from a hole in the wall, because that's how much of how hectic it can be the day of show, where a lot of times it's like, dude, what time are you getting here? Okay, here's what you have to do. My only time I might talk to you is during the locker room meeting, and then giving you your pay at the end of the night. So, I hate for it to be a stop and smell the roses moment, but at least that we kind of have a chance time's the most valuable entity that there is. And so I think it's really important that everybody make the most of it, but also knowing that wrestling will come back at some point, and we want to make sure the scene's better than ever. So get your plugs in. I'm sorry that was so long. I'll get off my soapbox now. Tell us where we could buy your t-shirt so we can throw some money at you.
No, it's all good. That's really what it is, though. It's the community, and being able to have that is great. But yeah, just follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Wheeler YUTA if you want to buy a t-shirt. I'm probably going to have a new Steel Drum t-shirt coming out sooner rather than later, hopefully.
YUTA, talking about Twitter and talking about the Steel Drum, I just checked and a fan did ask, are you going to be playing the Steel Drum at shows?
I would like to. I don't know how to integrate it yet. Like it's a stationary thing. Like I can't really play.
Oh, no, get the full spin. Let's take a good look at this.
Okay. So it is right here. It's behind me. It's so like a steel drum, the name comes from, it's an oil drum that you cut off down here, and then you literally beat it with a hammer into different pitches across it. But it's stationary, so like I could play it for like a little bit. I don't know if I told you this. I learned Copacabana when we were talking about maybe doing some stuff with me and Colt for season 1. Because I was like, maybe I'll play the ring someday. I don't know.
You definitely didn't, because I had no idea that you had this very specific skill until you started making the Twitter videos. How long have you been doing it, and what made you decide to start doing the videos on it?
So yeah, I actually started in like 2nd grade. So in elementary school, my music teacher, he was a college professor of music, got tired of teaching at college and was just like, I want to move to Myrtle Beach. So he would like play steel drum at like events or like at restaurants and weddings and whatever he could get on the weekends. And then during the week, he was an elementary school music teacher. So he taught us how to play in like very limited capacity at school. And then I was like, this is great. I want to kind of take this and run with it. So I started getting lessons from him because he lived right down the street. Eventually, I bought my own drum, started playing gigs. In high school, I would play weddings and parties and stuff like that. So that was like that was my job at the time. So it was great, yeah. But I would do that for a while, and then after that, I moved up to Philly, and like I couldn't really play it in a college dorm room, so I kind of fell out of it for a while. I have one in Philly in my uncle's basement that I just haven't touched in 4 years. So when I came home, I had the other drum here, and I was like, let me just practice it, like see what I can still do. And then I was like, I still remember most of it. And then I was like, maybe Twitter would like this. So I posted just one video a cappella of my favorite song, and it blew up, and people were like, this is crazy. And I was like, oh, I never really thought of it like that, because I just knew people that could play it. So then I was like, all right, well, let me post something every day, because I have a fairly decent back catalog and people seem to like it, and kind of gives them some positive thoughts during this time. So yeah.
Cool. So where's that steel drum t-shirt going to be available at?
So that'll probably be one that you're just going to have to DM me through Twitter or Instagram. You can also shoot me an email at it's yutarwrestling@gmail.com. So once that gets finished up and released, I'll post it on all my social media, and then we'll be able to do it through PayPal like that.
Good, man. I'm pumped. Save me one in a 3X, and then save me one in a 4X, because who knows what we're going to be looking at coming out of this quarantine. So
you got it.
All right, man. Thanks for your time, man. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.